The stars looked peaceful from the bridge of the UES Mercy's Dawn. Captain Park Jin-woo stood at the main window, watching the distant lights twinkle in the darkness. His ship was not built for war. It carried no heavy weapons, no thick armor, plating. Instead, it held medical supplies, rescue equipment, and hope. "Captain, we're getting a distress signal," called Yoon Hai-won from her station. The young communications officer's face was pale as she listened to her headset. "It's from the Kepler colony. They're under attack." Park turned away from the stars. "Put it through." Static filled the bridge, then a desperate voice broke through. "This is Kepler colony to any ships in range. We are under attack by Vorthon forces. We have wounded civilians. Medical assistance needed urgently. Please help us." Dr. Lee So-min looked up from her medical reports. She was a small woman with kind eyes who had spent her life healing others. "Captain, we should go. They need us." Park nodded. The Mercy's Dawn was a rescue ship. This was what they did. "Set course for Kepler colony. Maximum speed." The ship turned toward the colony system. In the medical bay, Dr. Lee began preparing for wounded patients. She had treated many different alien species during her years in space. Humans, Altarians, with their blue skin, the insect-like Zephyrians, even some of the peaceful Vorthon traders who had broken away from their warlike empire. Kim Tai-ho was working in the engine room when the ship jumped to faster-than-light speed. He was young, barely 25, but already one of the best engineers in the human fleet. He loved his job because it helped save lives. Every repair he made, every system he improved, meant the ship could reach more people who needed help. "Tae-ho, we need more power to the medical systems," came Dr. Lee's voice over the comm. "Already on it, Doctor," he replied, adjusting the power flow. "You'll have everything you need." On the upper decks, Choi Ye-jin was checking the isolation chambers. As the ship's xenobiologist, she made sure they could safely treat any alien species. She had studied the biology of dozens of different races. Her knowledge had saved countless lives when doctors needed to know how to treat wounds in non-human patients. The Mercy's Dawn dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler system. Immediately they could see the problem. 3 large Vorthon warships hung in space near the small colony planet. Fires burned on the surface where the attack had struck. "This is Captain Park of the UES Mercy's Dawn," Park broadcast on all frequencies. "We are a medical vessel responding to your distress call. We are not armed and pose no threat to anyone." The Vorthon ships did not respond. They continued their attack on the planet below. "Take us in," Park ordered. "We need to get to those people." The Mercy's Dawn moved toward the planet. The ship's hull was painted bright white with large red crosses, the universal symbol for medical assistance. Any civilized species in the galaxy would recognize it and leave them alone. As they entered the planet's atmosphere, Park could see the damage. The main city was burning. Vorthon fighters had destroyed the spaceport and many civilian buildings. But in a valley outside the city, hundreds of people were gathered, humans and aliens together, all fleeing the attack. "There," pointed Dr. Lee. "We can land near those refugees." The ship touched down in the valley. Immediately, the medical teams rushed out. Dr. Lee led them, carrying emergency medical supplies. They found wounded everywhere. Human children crying for their parents. Altarian families huddling together, their blue skin dark with fear. Even some Vorthon civilians who had rejected their empire's violent ways. Kim Tae-ho worked quickly to set up power for the medical equipment. Choi Ye-jin moved among the wounded, identifying which species needed special treatment. The crew of The Mercy's Dawn worked together like they had trained for years. "We need to get the worst cases onto the ship," Dr. Lee called out. "The medical bay can handle 20 critical patients. They loaded the most badly wounded onto stretchers. A human, woman with burns covering her arms, an Altarian child who had been hit by debris, an elderly Vorthon man who had been protecting a human family when the attack began." Park stood guard outside the ship, watching the sky. He could see the Vorthon warships still in orbit above them. But medical ships were protected by galactic law. No one attacked doctors and nurses. It was the most basic rule of civilized warfare. "Captain, we need more time," Dr. Lee reported. "There are too many wounded. We can't leave them." "Take all the time you need, Doctor," Park replied. "We're not leaving anyone behind." More shuttles arrived from the colony's other settlements. Each one brought more wounded refugees. The crew of the Mercy's Dawn worked without rest. They treated burns, broken bones, and wounds from Vorthon energy weapons. They gave food and water to hungry children. They comforted families who had lost their homes. Yun Haiwan kept broadcasting their status to anyone listening. "This is the medical vessel Mercy's Dawn. We are conducting humanitarian rescue operations. All patients receive equal treatment regardless of species or origin." Kim Tae-ho installed extra power generators to run more medical equipment. Choi Ye-jin helped translate between the different species, making sure everyone understood what was happening. The ship's crew worked together perfectly. As the hours passed, they saved more than 300 lives. The medical bay was full, but they found space for everyone who needed help. Dr. Lee barely slept as she moved from patient to patient. Her hands were steady, her voice calm, even as the situation grew more desperate. "We're getting reports of more Vorthon ships arriving," Yoon Hae-won announced. "A full battle fleet." Park looked up at the sky. The peaceful stars were now filled with warships. But the Mercy's Dawn was clearly marked as a medical vessel. They were following all the rules. They were saving lives, not taking them. "Continue." "The rescue operation," he ordered. "We have work to do." The crew of the Mercy's Dawn continued their mission. They had sworn an oath to help all who needed healing. It did not matter if those they saved were human or alien, friend or enemy. A life was a life, and every life had value. In the medical bay, Dr. Lee worked on a wounded Vorthon child. The boy had been hurt when his family tried to escape the violence of their own people. As she treated his injuries, the child looked up at her with grateful eyes. "Thank you," he whispered in broken human language. Dr. Lee smiled. "That's what we're here for." Outside, Captain Park watched the stars and thought about his crew. They were good people doing important work. The galaxy needed ships like the Mercy's Dawn. It needed people who would risk their own safety to help others. He had no way of knowing that in a few hours everything would change forever. The morning sun was rising over Kepler Colony when the new Vorthon ships arrived. Captain Park stood on the bridge of the Mercy's Dawn, watching 3 massive dreadnoughts drop out of faster-than-light travel. These ships were different from the smaller vessels that had been attacking the colony. They were huge, dark, and covered in weapons. "Captain, they're scanning us," reported Yoon Haiwan from her communication station. Her voice was nervous but steady. "Broadcast our medical status again," Park ordered. "Make sure they know who we are." Yoon Haiwan sent out the standard message. "This is the UES Mercy's Dawn, a medical vessel operating under galactic humanitarian law. We are treating wounded civilians and pose no military threat to anyone." The largest Vorthon ship moved closer. Park could see its name painted on the hull in alien letters. Dr. Lee joined him on the bridge, still wearing her medical coat stained with the blood of the patients she had been treating all night. "How are our patients, Doctor?" Park asked. "Stable, but we can't move them yet," she replied. "Some are too badly wounded to transport. We need at least another day." Park nodded. They would stay as long as needed. That was their job. From the Vorthan flagship came a transmission. The alien face that appeared on their screen was brutal and scarred. Commander Thex Mordain of the Vorthan Empire had cold, dark eyes that showed no mercy. "Human vessel, you are interfering with Vorthan military operations," Mordain said in harsh, broken human language. "Leave this system immediately." Park stepped forward. "Commander, we are a medical ship. We are treating wounded civilians under galactic humanitarian law. We have the right to be here." Mordain's face twisted with disgust. "Humans and their weakness. You help our enemies. You show mercy to those who deserve none. This makes you our enemy as well." "We treat everyone equally," Park replied calmly. "We have Vorthan civilians aboard right now, wounded in your own attack. We don't choose sides. We just save lives." The Vorthan commander laughed, a cold sound that made everyone on the bridge uncomfortable. "Saving lives is for the weak. The strong take what they want and destroy what stands in their way." Park felt his crew watching him. In the medical bay below, more than 300 wounded people trusted the Mercy's Dawn to keep them safe. Humans and aliens, adults and children, all looking to them for protection. "Commander, we will not leave until our patients are stable," Park said firmly. "We are protected by galactic law. Medical ships are not targets." Mordain's eyes grew even colder. "Your laws mean nothing to us. The Vorthan Empire takes what it wants. Your compassion is weakness, and weakness must be destroyed." The transmission ended. On the bridge of the Mercy's Dawn, everyone was quiet. They had dealt with hostile forces before, but never like this. Most civilized species respected medical neutrality, even in war. "Captain, what do we do?" asked Yun Hai-Wan. "We continue our mission," Park replied. "Dr. Lee, how much more time do you need?" "At least 12 hours for the critical cases," she answered. "Maybe longer." Park made his decision. "Then we stay 12 hours. In the medical bay, Kim Tae-ho was helping Dr. Lee with the most seriously wounded patients. A human girl, maybe 8 years old, had been badly burned in the attack. An Altarian father held his injured son while Choi Ye-jin worked to treat the child's broken bones. "The Vorthans are really going to attack us?" Kim Tae-ho asked quietly. Dr. Lee looked at the wounded child she was treating. "I don't know, but we can't abandon these people. Look at them, Tae-ho. They trust us to keep them safe." Kim Tae-ho nodded. He was young, but he understood. The Mercy's Dawn was more than just a ship. It was a promise that some people in the galaxy still cared about doing the right thing. On the bridge, Yun Hai-Wan monitored the Vorthan fleet. The 3 dreadnoughts had formed a triangle around the planet. Their weapons were powered up, but they had not fired yet. "Captain, I'm picking up communications between the Vorthan ships," she reported. "They're speaking in their military code, but I think they're discussing us." "Keep listening," Park ordered. "And keep broadcasting our medical status. Maybe someone in their fleet still has honor." Hours passed. The crew of the Mercy's Dawn continued their work. Dr. Lee and her team treated wound after wound. Kim Tae-ho kept the power flowing to the medical equipment. Choi Ye-jin helped translate and made sure alien patients got the right treatment for their biology. But the Vorthan ships moved closer. "Captain, they're targeting us," Yun Hai-Wan said suddenly. All three ships have weapons locked onto our position. Park opened the communication channel again. Commander Mordain, we are a medical vessel. We have wounded aboard. Attacking us would be a war crime under galactic law. Mordain's face appeared on screen again. I told you, human, your laws mean nothing. Your mercy is weakness, and the Vorthan Empire destroys weakness wherever it finds it. In the medical bay, Dr. Lee felt the ship shudder as the Vorthan ships powered up their main weapons. She looked at the wounded people around her. Families holding each other, children who had already lost so much. It's going to be okay, she whispered to the burned human girl. We're going to take care of you. But she knew it was a lie. On the bridge, Park made one last attempt. Commander, we have children aboard, wounded children who just need medical care. Please, show mercy. Mordain smiled, a cruel expression that showed his sharp teeth. Mercy is for the weak. The Vorthan Empire is strong. The first energy blast hit the Mercy's Dawn's engine section. Kim Tae-ho was thrown against the wall as explosions rocked the ship. Emergency lights flashed red as power failed throughout the vessel. They're really doing it, Yoon Hae-won whispered, in shock. They're attacking a medical ship. Park grabbed the emergency communicator. All hands, this is the captain. We are under attack. Protect the patients at all costs. The second blast tore through the medical bay. Dr. Lee threw herself over the wounded children as debris fell from the ceiling. Choi Ye-jin was helping an elderly Altarian when the explosion threw them both to the floor. This is the UES Mercy's Dawn, Yoon Hae-won broadcast desperately. We are a medical vessel under attack. We have wounded civilians aboard. This is a war crime. Someone please help us. But no help was coming. The three Vorthan dreadnoughts continued their attack, pouring energy blasts into the defenseless medical ship. They showed no mercy to the doctors, the nurses, or the wounded patients who had trusted the Mercy's Dawn to keep them safe. Kim Tae-ho died trying to restore power to the medical equipment. Choi Ye-jin died protecting an alien child from falling. Wreckage. Dr. Lee died holding the hand of the burned human girl, whispering that everything would be okay. Captain Park stayed on the bridge until the end, trying to send out one final message. As the ship broke apart around him, he thought about his crew and the people they had tried to save. They had done the right thing. They had followed the rules. They had shown mercy and compassion, and they had been murdered for it. The last thing Yoon Hae-won did was activate the emergency beacon. Her message, along with the recording of the attack, shot out into space toward Earth. Then the bridge exploded, and the Mercy's Dawn was gone. In space, where the medical ship had been, only debris remained. 327 people had died. Doctors, nurses, engineers, patients, and refugees, all killed by those who saw mercy as weakness. Commander Mordain looked at the wreckage and smiled. Weakness destroyed, he said. Continue the attack on the colony. But the message was already traveling faster than light toward Earth. And when humanity learned what had happened to the Mercy's Dawn, the galaxy would discover that humans had their own definition of strength. The message from the Mercy's Dawn reached Earth 18 hours after the attack. It arrived at the Central Communications Hub in Geneva, where night shift operator Lee Soo-jung was monitoring deep space transmissions. When she heard the desperate voice of Yoon Hae-won, her blood went cold. This is the UES Mercy's Dawn. We are a medical vessel under attack by Vorthan forces. They are firing on wounded civilians. This is a war crime. Someone please help us. Lee Soo-jung immediately forwarded the transmission to Terran Defense Command. Within minutes, it reached the desk of Admiral Jiang Min-ho, Supreme Commander of all human military forces. Jiang was a veteran of 30 years, a man who had seen war and death, but when he watched the recording from the Mercy's dawn, his hands shook with rage. The recording showed everything. Captain Park's calm attempts to reason with the Vorthan. Commander, the medical ship clearly marked with red crosses. The wounded civilians, including children, visible through the ship's windows. And then the attack. Energy blasts tearing apart a defenseless hospital ship while patients screamed inside. Jiang called an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. Within 2 hours, the most powerful military leaders in human space were gathered in the command center deep beneath the Swiss mountains. General Seo Hyun-woo, Commander of Ground Forces, Fleet Admiral Kang Mi-young, Head of the Space Navy, Intelligence Director No Jae-sung, and others. "You've all seen the recording," Jiang said quietly. "Tell me what you think." General Seo spoke first. He was a hard man who had fought in border conflicts against pirates and raiders. "This isn't war, Admiral. This is murder. They killed doctors. They killed patients. They killed children." Fleet Admiral Kang nodded. The Mercy's dawn was clearly marked as a medical vessel. The Vorthans knew exactly what they were attacking. This violates every rule of civilized warfare. "More than that," added Intelligence Director No. "This was deliberate. Commander Mordain could have forced the ship to leave. Instead, he chose to destroy it. He wanted to send a message that mercy is weakness." Admiral Jiang stood and walked to the large star map that covered one wall of the room. The Vorthan Empire was marked in red, a growing stain across the outer rim of the galaxy. They had been expanding for decades, conquering weaker species and enslaving entire worlds. For 50 years, the galactic community has tried to contain the Vorthan Empire through diplomacy, Jiang said. Trade sanctions, diplomatic protests, stern warnings. Nothing has worked. They keep expanding, keep conquering, keep killing. Turned back to face the Council. But they've never attacked us directly before. They've never killed human medical personnel. They've never murdered human children. General Seo leaned forward. "What are you saying, Admiral?" "I'm saying the Vorthans have made a mistake," Jiang replied. "They think mercy is weakness. They think compassion makes us soft. They're about to learn how wrong they are." The room was silent. Everyone knew what the Admiral was suggesting. For decades, humanity had been peaceful members of the galactic community. They traded, explored, helped other species with medical aid and disaster relief. They had avoided major wars since the unification of Earth, but humans had not forgotten how to fight. "The Terran Assembly will need to approve any military action," Director No pointed out. "Then we'll ask them," Jiang said. "But first, I want options. How do we respond to this attack?" Fleet Admiral Kang pulled up tactical displays showing human military assets. "We have 3 full battle fleets available for immediate deployment. The first fleet can be at the Vorthan border in 72 hours. Ground forces?" Jiang asked. 12 Marine divisions ready to deploy, General Seo replied. "Plus the Special Operations units. The Death Koreans are already asking for permission to deploy." Jiang nodded. The Death Koreans were humanity's most elite soldiers, trained for the most dangerous missions. If they were eager to fight, it meant they understood what the attack on the Mercy's dawn represented. "Intelligence assets?" Director No smiled grimly. "We've been monitoring Vorthan communications for years. We know their fleet positions, their supply lines, their command structure. If we decide to act, We can hit them where it hurts most. Admiral Jang looked around the room at his commanders. These were good people who had spent their careers protecting humanity and its allies. They were teachers, diplomats, engineers, and doctors who happened to wear military uniforms, but they were also the descendants of warriors who had once conquered their own world. "The Vorthans think they can attack our medical ships and face no consequences," Jang said. "They think we're too soft, too peaceful, too civilized to respond with force. They're about to discover they're wrong." 3 hours later, Admiral Jang stood before the Terran Assembly. Representatives from every human world and colony were present, either in person or through quantum communication links. The Great Hall was packed with senators, delegates, and observers. "Members of the Assembly," Jang began, 18 hours ago, Vorthon forces committed an act of war against humanity. They deliberately attacked and destroyed a clearly marked medical vessel, killing 327 civilians and medical personnel. The hall erupted in angry voices. Many representatives had seen the recording. Others were hearing the details for the first time. The sight of wounded children being murdered in a hospital ship filled them with rage. The UES Mercy's Dawn was conducting a humanitarian mission, Jang continued. They were treating wounded civilians of multiple species, following all rules of galactic law. The Vorthon commander who ordered the attack stated clearly that he viewed human mercy as weakness that needed to be destroyed. Senator Kim Da-un from the Mars colony stood up. "Admiral, what do you recommend?" "I recommend we show the Vorthon Empire what human strength really looks like," Jang replied. "I recommend Operation Righteous Fury." The details of the operation were classified, but the intent was clear. Humanity would respond to the attack with overwhelming force. They would not just punish the ships that attacked the Mercy's Dawn, they would dismantle the entire Vorthon military machine. The vote was unanimous. Every representative from every human world voted to authorize military action. The attack on the Mercy's Dawn had united humanity in a way nothing had before. They would show the galaxy that attacking human medical personnel was the worst mistake any species could make. As the Assembly voted, Admiral Jang thought about Captain Park and his crew. They had died doing their duty, following the highest ideals of human civilization. They had shown mercy to enemies, protected the innocent, and sacrificed themselves for others. Now it was time for the military to follow their own highest ideals. They would bring justice to those who murdered doctors and patients. They would ensure that no medical ship would ever again be attacked by those who mistook compassion for weakness. In military bases across human space, the word went out. The largest military mobilization in human history was beginning. Factories that built civilian goods would switch to making weapons and ships. Scientists who studied peaceful applications of technology would turn their genius to warfare. Diplomats who preferred negotiation would step aside for soldiers who understood that some enemies could only be stopped with force. The Vorthon Empire had wanted to test human resolve. They had attacked humanity's most cherished values, the protection of the innocent and the healing of the wounded. They had killed children and called it strength. They were about to learn what real strength looked like. Admiral Jang returned to his command center and activated the military communication network. Across human space, generals, admirals, and commanders waited for their orders. "This is Admiral Jang to all commands," he broadcast. "Operation Righteous Fury is authorized. We go to war not for conquest or glory, but for justice. The Vorthons wanted to destroy our mercy. Instead, They have awakened our wrath." The orders went out. Ships moved toward the Vorthon border. Soldiers prepared for battle. The human war machine, peaceful for decades, began to stir. The galaxy was about to see why humanity had survived and thrived among the stars. It wasn't because they were the strongest or the most advanced. It was because they never forgot that some things were worth fighting for, and protecting the innocent was always worth a war. Across human space, the transformation began within hours of the assembly vote. On the industrial world of Titan, factory supervisor Bei Su-jin received her new orders at Aero 300 local time. Her civilian manufacturing plants, which had been producing agricultural equipment and household goods, would now build weapons of war. "How long do we have?" asked her assistant Lim Chang-wook, looking at the massive retooling requirements. 72 hours to full wartime production," Bei Su-jin replied, her voice steady despite the enormity of the task. "We're going to build the weapons that will make the Vorthons pay for what they did." The factory floor buzzed with activity as workers dismantled production lines for farming tractors and began assembling the equipment to build military drones. These weren't just any weapons. These were the culmination of decades of human engineering, designed but never built in hopes they would never be needed. On the research station orbiting Jupiter, Dr. Park Sung-min unlocked classified files that had been sealed for 20 years. Project Prometheus contained humanity's most advanced weapons designs, kinetic bombardment systems that could crack planets, swarm missiles that could overwhelm any defense, energy weapons that made Vorthon technology look primitive. "Are we really going to build these?" asked his research partner, Dr. Yoon Min-soo, staring at the specifications for a relativistic kinetic weapon. "The Vorthans murdered children in a hospital ship," Dr. Park replied grimly. "Yes, we're going to build them, and we're going to use them." At the Luna Naval Shipyards, Admiral Lim Dong-hyun watched as construction crews swarmed over 3 massive vessels. The dreadnoughts had been 90% complete for years, waiting for final authorization. Now they would be finished and armed with humanity's most advanced weapons. "How long until the first fleet is ready to deploy?" asked his aide, Commander Oh Kyung-soo. 48 hours, Admiral Lim replied. "Every ship we have is being refitted with the new weapons. The Vorthans have never seen anything like what we're preparing," Commander Oh nodded. He led one of humanity's most elite military units, the Death Koreans. They had earned their name during the unification wars on Earth, when they had never retreated from any battle, no matter the odds. They were eager to deploy against the Vorthons. The Cyber Warfare Center on Earth, Shin Woo-jin cracked his knuckles and began typing. His job was to infiltrate Vorthon computer networks and gather intelligence on their fleet movements, but he had other plans as well. "What are you doing?" asked his supervisor, Captain Yu Min-jun. "I'm going to broadcast the recording of the Mercies. Dawn attack to every Vorthon ship and colony," Shin replied. "I want every Vorthon to see exactly what their military did. I want them to know why humanity is coming for them." Captain Yu smiled grimly. "Do it. Let them see what their strength really looks like." On military bases across human space, soldiers prepared for war. These weren't career warriors who lived for battle. They were teachers, farmers, engineers, and students who had answered their planet's call. They were people who would rather build than destroy, heal rather than harm. But they understood that sometimes violence was the only way to stop greater violence. Sergeant Kim Da-yoon assembled her Special Forces team on the training grounds of Fort Armstrong. Her soldiers were among humanity's best, trained for the most dangerous missions behind enemy lines. "Listen up," she addressed her team. "We're not going to war for conquest or glory. We're going because some bastards decided that mercy is weakness. They killed doctors. They killed patients. They killed children who were just trying to get medical help." Her soldiers listened in grim silence. They had all seen the recording from the Mercy's dawn. They had watched children die while Vorthon ships poured fire into a defenseless medical vessel. "Our job is to show them what real strength looks like," Sergeant Kim continued. "We're going to hunt down every ship, every commander, every soldier who was involved in that attack. And we're going to make sure they face justice." Private Ryu Sang-ho raised his hand. "Sergeant, what if they surrender?" "Then we accept their surrender and treat them according to the rules of war," Kim replied. "We're not like them. We don't murder prisoners or attack the defenseless, but we will fight with everything we have to make sure they can never attack another medical ship." In the weapons testing facilities of Europa, scientists worked around the clock to finalize humanity's new arsenal. The weapons had been designed years ago but never built, kept as theoretical concepts in case they were ever needed. Now, with the murder of the Mercy's Dawn crew fresh in everyone's mind, the safety restrictions were lifted. The kinetic bombardment. "System is ready," reported Dr. Hanbo Ram to the testing committee. "We can accelerate projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. One shot can destroy a capital ship or level a military base." "The swarm missile system?" asked Admiral Zhang, who had come to oversee the final preparations. 3,000 missiles per launcher," replied Dr. An Yerin. "Each missile can think independently and coordinate with the others. No point defense system can stop them all." Admiral Zhang nodded. These weapons were terrible in their power, designed to end wars quickly rather than drag them out. The faster the war ended, the fewer people would die. "What about defensive systems?" he asked. "Our ships will be protected by energy shields that can absorb multiple direct hits," Dr. Han explained. "And our armor uses the same materials we developed for asteroid mining. It can withstand impacts that would destroy most alien vessels." As the weapons were finalized, human fleets began moving toward the Vorthon border. The first fleet, commanded by Admiral Lim, consisted of 50 capital ships and 200 support vessels. Each ship carried weapons that could devastate Vorthon forces. But this was just the beginning. Behind the first fleet came the second and third fleets, with even more advanced weapons. Ground forces prepared to deploy to Vorthon worlds. Special operations teams planned missions to capture Vorthon commanders alive so they could stand trial for their crimes. The mobilization was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity, which had been peaceful members of the galactic community for decades, was revealing the true extent of their technological and military capabilities. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Lim reviewed the battle plans. The first target would be the Vorthon border fortress at Kepler system, where the Mercy's Dawn had been destroyed. The Vorthon still occupied that system, treating it like a prize of war. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Vorthon. High Command," reported his communications officer. The message was brief and arrogant. The Vorthons demanded that humanity withdraw its fleets and accept Vorthon control over the disputed border regions. In exchange, they would not attack any more human medical ships. Admiral Lim deleted the message without responding. The Vorthons still didn't understand. This wasn't about territory or trade routes. This was about justice for the murder of 327 innocent people. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "We jump to Kepler system in 6 hours. It's time to show the Vorthons what happens when you attack a human medical ship." In his private quarters, Admiral Lim looked at a photo of the Mercy's Dawn crew. Captain Park Jin-woo, who had tried until the last moment to reason with the Vorthans. Dr. Lee So-min, who had died protecting her patients. Kim Tae-ho, Choi Ye-jin, Yoon Hae-won, and all the others who had given their lives trying to heal the wounded and protect the innocent. "We're coming," he whispered to their memory. "Justice is coming." Behind him, the greatest war fleet in human. History prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed. The Vorthans had wanted to test human resolve. They had attacked humanity's most sacred values and murdered those who embodied them. Now they would face the consequences. The human war machine was awake, and it would not rest until every last person responsible for the Mercy's Dawn massacre had been brought to justice. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their absolute refusal to let evil go unpunished. The first human ships arrived at the edge of Vorthon space, like ghosts in the night. Captain Han Bo-ram commanded the stealth destroyer squadron, 12 ships designed to be invisible to enemy sensors. They had traveled for 3 days at maximum speed to reach the Vorthon border fortress at Thakara Station. "Target acquired," reported Lieutenant Park Min-jun from the weapons console. "Thakara Station, exactly where intelligence said it would be." Han Bo-ram studied the massive Vorthon base through her ship's sensors. It was huge, heavily armed, and protected by a fleet of 20 warships. The station controlled 3-star systems and served as a supply depot for Vorthon expansion fleets. "Any sign they've detected us?" she asked. "Negative, Captain," replied Ensign Lee Ji-hoon from the sensor station. "We're still invisible to their scans." Han Bo-ram nodded. The stealth technology had been developed for exploration missions, to study dangerous phenomena without being detected. Now it would serve a different purpose. "Signal the squadron," she ordered. "Begin attack pattern Alpha. Target their supply depots first, then their command center. We want this base crippled, not destroyed. There might be prisoners aboard." The 12 human ships moved silently through space toward their targets. Their weapons were unlike anything the Vorthans had seen before. Instead of energy beams that could be blocked by shields, they fired solid projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds. The kinetic impact was devastating. The first salvo struck Thakara Station's fuel depot. The explosion lit up space for thousands of kilometers as stored antimatter detonated. The Vorthon ships scrambled to respond, but they couldn't see their attackers. "Direct hit on the command center," reported Lieutenant Park. "Station communications are down." "Target the weapons platforms," Han Bo-ram ordered. More invisible projectiles slammed into the station's defenses. Gun turrets exploded, shield generators overloaded, and docking bays collapsed. The Vorthon fleet tried to fight back, firing wildly into space at targets they couldn't see. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the station," reported the communications officer. "Put it through." The Vorthon commander's face appeared on screen, his alien features twisted with rage and confusion. "Human ships, identify yourselves. Why are you attacking us? We have done nothing to you." Han Bo-ram felt a cold anger rise in her chest. "Nothing? You destroyed the UES Mercy's Dawn. You murdered 327 innocent people, including children." The Vorthon's expression changed from anger to confusion. "A medical ship. That was Commander Mordane's action. It was not authorized by High Command." "Then you should have stopped him," Han Bo-ram replied. "Instead, your empire celebrated the attack. You called human mercy a weakness to be destroyed." "But we are not warriors," the Vorthon protested. "This is a supply station. We have families here, civilians." "So did the Mercy's Dawn," Han Boram said coldly. "The difference is, we're not going to murder them. Surrender now, and no one else dies." The Vorthon commander looked around his damaged control room. Half his weapons were destroyed, his communications were down, and his fleet was being picked off by invisible attackers. He had no choice. We surrender. All Vorthon ships, power down your weapons, and prepare to be boarded," Han Boram ordered. "Any ship that resists will be destroyed." As the human squadron revealed themselves and began securing the station, other operations were beginning across Vorthon space. In the Cyber Warfare Center on Earth, Shin Woo-jin had successfully infiltrated the Vorthon military network. In," he announced to his team, broadcasting the Mercy's Dawn recording to every Vorthon world and ship. The recording spread through Vorthon space like wildfire. Soldiers and civilians who had been told that the attack was a glorious victory against human weakness now saw the truth. They watched as energy beams tore apart a clearly marked medical ship. They heard the screams of wounded children as the vessel broke apart. Many Vorthons were horrified. Some of the species that served in the Vorthon military began to question their orders. On several worlds, protests broke out against the military leadership that had ordered such an atrocity. But the Vorthon High Command was furious. Admiral Thex Vorkon, Supreme Commander of Vorthon forces, called an emergency meeting of his war council. "The humans dare to attack our territory," he raged, his scarred face twisted with anger. "They invade our space, destroy our stations, and spread their propaganda among our people." "Sir, our losses at Thakara were minimal," reported his aide, Colonel Dresh Makor. "Only military equipment was destroyed. The humans deliberately avoided civilian casualties. Weakness," Vorkon snarled. "This proves that humans are soft. They could have destroyed the entire station but chose not to. We will crush them with superior firepower." The Admiral was wrong, but he would not learn his mistake until it was too late. Human restraint was not weakness. It was controlled strength, the discipline to use overwhelming power precisely rather than wastefully. At the Cathara system, Admiral Lim Dong-hyun's First Fleet prepared for the first major battle of the war. Intelligence reports indicated that a large Vorthon force was stationed there, protecting an important shipyard. "Enemy fleet composition?" Lim asked his tactical officer. 42 capital ships, 68 destroyers, and 30 support vessels," replied Commander Oh Kyung-soo. "They outnumber us 2-1. Admiral Lim smiled grimly. "Numbers won't save them. Signal the fleet. We engage in 30 minutes. Thisat." Human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Cathara system. Immediately, alarms sounded on the Vorthon ships. They had been expecting human retaliation, but they thought it would be a small raid like the attack on Thakara Station. Instead, they faced 50 of humanity's most advanced warships. "This is Admiral Vrek Thanor of the Vorthon Empire," came a transmission from the enemy flagship. "Human ships, you are trespassing in Vorthon space. Withdraw immediately or face destruction." "This is Admiral Lim of the Terran Space Force," came the reply. "You are in possession of war criminals. Surrender them for trial, and we will spare your fleet." "War criminals?" Thanor laughed. "Commander Mordain is a hero. He destroyed a ship full of human weaklings who dared to interfere with Vorthon expansion. He murdered children," Lim said quietly. "Medical personnel. Patients who were seeking healing. If you won't surrender him, then you share his guilt." The Vorthon admiral cut the transmission and ordered his fleet to attack. Energy beams lanced out toward the human ships, but they struck barriers of pure force that absorbed the impact harmlessly. "Shield effectiveness?" asked Admiral Lim. 96%, reported his tactical officer. "Their weapons barely scratched. Us. Return fire. Target their engines first. I want prisoners, not corpses." The human ships opened fire with weapons the Vorthons had never seen before. Streams of projectiles moving at incredible speed punched through Vorthon shields like they weren't there. Instead of trying to destroy the enemy ships completely, the humans aimed for engines, weapons, and life support systems. The battle was over in 20 minutes. Half the Vorton fleet was disabled, their crews alive but helpless. The rest tried to flee, but found their escape routes blocked by more human ships that had appeared from nowhere. "This is impossible," Admiral Thanor whispered as he watched his fleet being systematically dismantled. "How are they so powerful?" The answer was simple. Humanity had spent decades developing advanced technology for peaceful purposes. Mining equipment that could shatter asteroids became kinetic weapons. Industrial shields that protected workers from radiation became military barriers. Medical sensors that could detect minute biological changes became targeting systems that could track enemies across vast distances. "Admiral Thanor, this is Admiral Lim," came the transmission. "Your fleet is defeated. Surrender now and your crews will be treated according to the rules of war." Thanor looked around his damaged bridge. His weapons were destroyed, his engines disabled, and his communications partially offline. He had no choice. "We surrender." As the human forces began securing the Vorthon ships, Admiral Lim thought about the crew of the Mercy's Dawn. They had died trying to save lives following the highest ideals of human civilization. Now the military was following their own highest ideals. Overwhelming force used with precision and restraint. Victory achieved with minimal loss of life. But this was only the beginning. The Vorthons had wanted to test human resolve by attacking those who could not fight back. Now they were learning that humanity had spent centuries perfecting the art of war, even while hoping they would never need to use it. The message was spreading through Vorthon space. Attacking human medical personnel was the worst mistake any species could make. The humans were coming, not for conquest or glory, but for justice. And they would not stop until every last person responsible for the Mercy's Dawn massacre had been brought to trial. The galaxy was about to see what happened when the most peaceful species in known space decided that war was the only path to justice. The Vorthon Empire had ruled through fear for 3 centuries. They conquered worlds, enslaved populations, and crushed anyone who dared resist. Their military doctrine was simple: overwhelming brutality that broke enemy morale before the first shot was fired. They had never faced an enemy like humanity. General Seo Hyun-woo stood in the war room deep beneath the Swiss mountains, studying tactical displays that showed the progress of human forces across Vorthon space. In just 2 weeks, humanity had captured or destroyed 47 Vorthon military installations without losing a single ship. "Sir, we're receiving reports from the 3rd Fleet," announced Colonel Kim Da-eun, his chief of staff. "Admiral Park has successfully blockaded the Vorthon shipyards at Zarian Prime." General Seo nodded. The blockade was part of humanity's new doctrine of total war. They weren't just defeating Vorthon fleets in battle. They were systematically destroying the Empire's ability to wage war at all. "Any civilian casualties?" he asked. "None, sir." Admiral Park's forces targeted only military installations and supply depots. Civilian areas were avoided completely. This was what separated human warfare from Vorthon brutality. While the Vorthons murdered doctors and patients, humans fought with surgical precision. They could have turned Vorthon worlds into burning ruins, but they chose to disable rather than destroy, to capture rather than kill. But precision did not mean weakness. On the asteroid belt mining station at Ceres, Yu Min-jun coordinated the deployment of humanity's most terrifying weapon. The asteroid protocol used mining equipment to accelerate massive rocks to near-light speed, turning them into planet-killing projectiles. Target confirmed, reported his assistant, Dr. Kang Mi-young. Vorthon military fortress at Draka 7. No civilian population within 500 kilometers. Launch authorization? Yu asked. Confirmed. The fortress is being used to coordinate attacks on medical ships and refugee convoys. Yu Min-jun activated the launch sequence. An asteroid the size of a small moon began accelerating toward its target, guided by the same navigation systems humanity used for peaceful space exploration. When it struck the Vorthon fortress 3 days later, the impact would be visible from orbit. The Vorthons were beginning to understand that they had awakened something terrible. Reports reached their high command of human tactics that defied comprehension. Ships that could appear and disappear at will, weapons that could punch through any defense, soldiers who fought with a determination that bordered on fanaticism. Admiral Thex Vorkon called another emergency meeting of his war council. His scarred face was pale as he reviewed the latest casualty reports. "How many ships have we lost?" he asked. 237 capital ships, replied his aide, Colonel Dresh Makor. 368 destroyers, 412 support vessels. And human losses? 0 ships destroyed, 17 damaged and returned to service. Vorkon slammed his fist on the table. "This is impossible! How can they be so powerful?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Commander Zex Corvain had been captured during the battle at Kythera and was now a prisoner aboard the human flagship. He had been treated well, given medical care, and allowed to observe human operations. What he saw terrified him. "They don't fight like us," he reported during his interrogation. "When we attack, we try to break enemy morale with brutality. When they attack, they try to end the war as quickly as possible with minimal casualties." "Minimal casualties?" Vorkon sneered. "They've destroyed half our fleet, but they've captured more prisoners than they've killed," Corvain continued, "and they treat prisoners according to galactic law. They've even provided medical care to wounded Vorthon soldiers." This was what the Vorthon leadership couldn't understand. Human warfare wasn't driven by hatred or desire for conquest. It was driven by justice. They fought not to destroy the Vorthon people, but to remove their government's ability to attack the innocent. But when the Vorthons tried to use civilian shields, they learned that human mercy had limits. On the colony, world of Vega Prime, Vorthon forces had taken hostages from the local population. Men, women, and children were placed in key military installations, hoping that humans would hesitate to attack. Lieutenant Kim Da-eun led a special forces team to rescue the hostages. Her unit was among humanity's most elite soldiers, trained for impossible missions behind enemy lines. "Thermal scans show 37 hostages in the main building," reported Sergeant Ryu Sang-ho. "At least 60 Vorthon soldiers using them as shields." "Rules of engagement?" asked Corporal Lee Min-ho. "Save every hostage," Kim Da-eun replied grimly. "If that means going through 60 Vorthons with our bare hands, so be it." The assault began at midnight. Human soldiers moved through the building, like shadows, using non-lethal weapons to disable Vorthan guards. When the aliens tried to threaten the hostages, they found themselves facing soldiers who would rather die than let innocent people be harmed. The rescue took 4 hours. Every hostage was saved. Most of the Vorthan soldiers were captured alive, though they would spend the rest of their lives in prison for using civilians as shields. "This is Lieutenant Kim to base," she reported when the mission was complete. "All hostages secure. The children are asking if we brought any chocolate." Even in war, humanity remembered what they were fighting for. As the conflict escalated, the Vorthans became increasingly desperate. They attacked human civilian convoys, hoping to force humanity to negotiate. Instead, they discovered that attacking human civilians only made the response more devastating. Admiral Lim Dong-hyun received reports of a Vorthan attack on a human agricultural colony. 34 farmers and their families had been killed in the raid. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "We're ending this." The human response was swift and overwhelming. Every Vorthan military base within 100 light-years was attacked simultaneously. Not destroyed. The humans still followed the rules of war, but rendered completely useless. Ships were disabled, weapons were confiscated, and personnel were taken prisoner. The message was clear. For every human civilian killed, the Vorthan Empire would lose the military capacity of an entire sector. But perhaps the most devastating human weapon was information. Shin Woo-jin's cyber warfare unit continued broadcasting the truth about the Mercy's dawn attack to every corner of Vorthan space. The images of children dying in a hospital ship, murdered by their own militaries. Orders turned many Vorthan civilians against their government. Protests erupted on dozens of Vorthan worlds. Some species that had been conquered by the Empire began to rebel, inspired by humanity's example of fighting for justice rather than conquest. "Sir, we're receiving reports of uprisings on 12 Vorthan worlds," reported Captain Yu Min-jun. "The local populations are demanding that their leaders surrender the war criminals responsible for the Mercy's dawn attack." Admiral Jang Min-ho, Supreme Commander of Human Forces, nodded grimly. "The Vorthan people are starting to understand what their government did. They're realizing that this war could end tomorrow if their leaders just handed over the murderers." But the Vorthan High Command refused to surrender. They had built their empire on the belief that might made right, that showing mercy was weakness. Even as their military collapsed around them, they could not accept that they had been wrong. "We will fight to the last ship," Admiral Vorkan declared in a broadcast to his remaining forces. "The Vorthan Empire will never bow to human weakness." He was wrong about human weakness. Humanity's restraint in war, their refusal to target civilians, their insistence on treating prisoners well, these weren't signs of weakness. They were signs of strength so complete that humans could afford to be merciful. But Vorkan's refusal to surrender meant the war would continue. The Vorthans still held their home system, still commanded significant forces, and still believed they could win through superior brutality. They were about to learn that when humans decided to end a war, they ended it completely. In his private quarters aboard the flagship, Admiral Lim looked at the photo of the Mercy's Dawn crew that he kept on his desk. Captain Park Jin-woo's kind face looked back at him, along with Dr. Lee So-min and all the others who had died trying to save lives. "We're almost done," he whispered to their memory. "Justice is coming." The final phase of the war was about to begin. The Vorthans had wanted to test human resolve by attacking those who could not fight back. Now they would face the full might, of a species that had spent centuries perfecting both the technology of peace and the methods of war. The galaxy would never forget what happened when someone was foolish enough to attack a human medical ship. The Vorthon homeworld of Korath Prime had never been touched by war. For 3 centuries, it had been the heart of an empire that spread terror across the galaxy. Now, for the first time in its history, enemy ships hung in orbit above the capital city. Admiral Lim Dong-hyun stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the world that had spawned the murderers of the Mercy's dawn. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents that reminded him of Earth. It was hard to believe that such a peaceful-looking world could be home to such cruelty. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the planetary government," reported his communications officer. The face that appeared on screen belonged to Prime Minister Vex Korath, the civilian leader of the Vorthon Empire. Unlike the scarred military, "Commanders, he looked like a bureaucrat, soft and frightened." "Admiral Lim, I wish to discuss terms of surrender," Korath said, his voice shaking. "There are no terms," Lim replied coldly. "Unconditional surrender. You will hand over every person responsible for the attack on the Mercy's dawn, starting with Commander Mordain and Admiral Vorkhan." "But Admiral, surely we can negotiate." 327 people died on that medical ship," Lim interrupted. "Doctors, nurses, patients, children. They died because your military decided that mercy was weakness. There will be no negotiation." The transmission ended. On the planet below, Prime Minister Korath turned to his advisors in panic. The human fleet in orbit was larger than anything the Vorthons had ever assembled. Worse, intelligence reports suggested this was only a fraction of humanity's total military power. "Can we fight them?" Korath asked his military advisors. General Drek Thanor, brother of the admiral who had been captured at Kithara, shook his head. "Sir, they've destroyed or captured 80% of our fleet. Our remaining forces are scattered and demoralized. Many of our own people are in open rebellion." It was true. Across the Vorthon Empire, worlds were surrendering to human forces without a fight. The footage of the Mercy's Dawn attack had spread throughout Vorthon space, and many civilians were horrified by what their military had done. Some species that had been conquered by the Vorthons were actively helping human forces, eager to see their oppressors brought to justice. "What about the other galactic powers?" Korath asked desperately. "Won't they intervene to stop human expansion?" His foreign minister, a thin alien named Zek Corvain, consulted his latest reports. "Sir, the Galactic Council has issued a statement supporting human actions. They're calling the attack on the Mercy's Dawn a crime against all civilized species." The truth was that the galaxy was terrified. Humanity had revealed military capabilities that far exceeded anything other species possessed. They had fought a war across half the galaxy without losing a single ship. They had captured or destroyed the most powerful military in known space in just 6 weeks. But what truly frightened the galactic community was humanity's restraint. They could have turned every Vorthan world into a burning wasteland, but they chose precision over destruction. They followed the rules of war even when their enemies ignored them. This wasn't the behavior of conquerors. This was the behavior of a species so powerful they could afford to be merciful. On Earth, Admiral Jang Minho met with the Galactic Council's emergency delegation. Ambassador Yex Thalanis of the Altarian. Republic spoke for the group. "Admiral, the Council wishes to mediate a peaceful end to this conflict," Thalanis said carefully. "Perhaps some form of reparations could be arranged." "Ambassador," Jang interrupted, "would your people negotiate? With murderers who attacked your medical ships? Thalanis was quiet for a moment. The Altarians were a peaceful species, much like humans had been before the Mercy's Dawn attack. No, he admitted. We would demand justice. Then you understand our position, Jang replied. The war criminals will be brought to trial. There will be no negotiation on that point. Back at Korath Prime, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Admiral Vorkon had barricaded himself in the military command center with his most loyal followers, refusing to surrender. Outside, crowds of Vorthon civilians demanded that he be handed over to the humans. Commander Mordain, the officer who had personally ordered the attack on the Mercy's Dawn, was hiding in a bunker deep beneath the capital city. He had become the most hated being in Vorthon space, reviled even by his own people. "Sir, the humans are demanding we surrender the war criminals," reported his aide, Lieutenant Zork Malik. "Never!" Mordain snarled. "I did what was necessary. Those humans were interfering with our rightful conquest." "But, sir, they were treating wounded civilians." "Civilians who were helping our enemies," Mordain snapped. "They deserved to die." Lieutenant Malik stared at his commander in horror. Like many Vorthons, he had been raised to believe that strength came from conquest, that mercy was weakness. But seeing the footage of children dying in a hospital ship had shaken that belief to its core. "Sir," Malik said quietly, "perhaps we should reconsider." Mordain drew his sidearm and shot his aide dead. "Anyone else want to question my orders?" The remaining officers in the bunker exchanged fearful glances. They were beginning to realize that they had followed a madman, and that madman had doomed their entire civilization. Above the planet, Admiral Lim was losing patience. Every hour the war criminals remained free was another hour that justice was delayed. He had received authorization from Earth for the final phase of operations. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Begin Operation Judgment." Human forces descended on Korath Prime like the hand of justice itself. But instead of orbital bombardment or massive ground assault, they conducted precision strikes on specific targets. Troop transports landed in the capital city, and elite soldiers moved through the streets with surgical precision. Sergeant Ryu Sang-ho led the team assigned to capture Admiral Vorkon. They found the military command center surrounded by an angry mob of Vorthon civilians who were demanding that the Admiral surrender himself. "Citizens of Korath," Ryu announced through a loudspeaker, "please step aside. We will handle this." The crowd parted eagerly. Many of them had lost family members in the various wars started by their government. They wanted to see their leaders face justice as much as the humans did. The assault on the command center took less than an hour. Vorkon's forces were equipped with energy weapons and personal shields, but human soldiers used kinetic weapons that punched through Vorthon defenses. Like they weren't there. More importantly, the humans were fighting for justice, while the Vorthons were fighting for a madman. When Vorkon was finally cornered in his office, he tried to make one last stand. "You think you've won?" he snarled at Sergeant Ryu. "The Vorthon Empire will rise again." "No," Ryu replied calmly. "It won't. Your empire was built on the idea that might makes right, that showing mercy is weakness. You're about to learn that you were wrong about everything." Vorkon was captured alive and unharmed despite his attempts to resist. He would stand trial for his crimes, along with every other officer who had participated in the attack on the Mercy's Dawn. Commander Mordain proved more difficult to capture. His bunker was heavily fortified and defended by his most fanatical followers. But humanity had tools that the Vorthons had never imagined. Lieutenant Kim Da-un led the Special Forces team that infiltrated the bunker. They used sonic weapons to stun the defenders, then gas that rendered them unconscious without permanent harm. When they reached Mordane's final hiding place, they found him cowering behind his desk. "You're under arrest for crimes against sentient life," Kim announced. "You will be taken to Earth to stand trial." "I did nothing wrong," Mordane screamed. "They were enemies. Enemies deserve to die." "They were doctors," Kim replied. "They were patients. They were children who needed medical care. And you murdered them because you thought mercy was weakness." As Mordane was led away in restraints, Kim thought about the crew of the Mercy's Dawn. Captain Park, who had tried to reason with the madman. Dr. Lee, who had died protecting her patients. All of them had shown true strength. The strength to help others even at the cost of their own lives. Within 24 hours, every war criminal on the list had been captured. They would be transported to Earth to face trial before a galactic tribunal. The evidence against them was overwhelming, including the recording of the attack itself. The Vorthan Empire surrendered completely. Their military was disbanded, their weapons confiscated, and their government reorganized under galactic oversight. The species that had been conquered by the Vorthons were freed to govern themselves. But perhaps the most important change was in the Vorthon people themselves. The attack on the Mercy's Dawn had shown them what their government's philosophy of might makes right really meant. They had seen children murdered in a hospital ship and called it strength. Now they saw real strength in the humans who had fought, with overwhelming power but perfect restraint, who had captured rather than killed, who had sought justice rather than revenge. The war was over. The galaxy would never again mistake human mercy for. The trial of the Vorthon war criminals was held on Earth, in the Great Assembly Hall in Geneva, where humanity had first voted to go to war. Representatives from every species in the galaxy came to witness justice being served. The defendants sat in a specially constructed dock, their faces showing everything from defiance to terror. Judge Park Soo-young, Chief Justice of the Terran Supreme Court, presided over the proceedings. She was a small, elderly woman who had spent her life upholding the law, but even she had been moved to tears when she first saw the footage from the Mercy's Dawn. "The defendants stand accused of crimes against sentient life," she announced to the packed courtroom. "The deliberate attack on a clearly marked medical vessel, resulting in the deaths of 327 innocent beings. Commander." Mordane sat in the front row of the defendant's dock. Even now, facing overwhelming evidence of his crimes, he showed no remorse. Admiral Vorkon beside him looked older and more tired, but equally unrepentant. The prosecution was led by Ambassador No Jae-sung, who had once been humanity's chief diplomat, but had volunteered to seek justice for the Mercy's Dawn victims. He stood before the court with quiet dignity as he presented the evidence. "Your honors, esteemed delegates, we gather here not for revenge, but for justice," No began. "The evidence will show that these defendants deliberately targeted and destroyed a medical vessel engaged in humanitarian operations. They murdered doctors, nurses, patients, and refugees who had sought only healing and safety." The courtroom watched in horrified silence as the recording from the Mercy's Dawn played once again. Captain Park's calm attempts at diplomacy. The clear medical markings on his ship, the wounded civilians visible through the windows, and then the attack, brutal and merciless, that killed everyone aboard. When the recording ended, there was not a sound in the courtroom. Even some of the defendants looked shaken, seeing their actions from the outside for the first time. "The defense may present their case," Judge Park announced. The Vorthon lawyers tried to argue that their clients had been following military orders, that they had believed the human ship was a legitimate target. But the evidence was overwhelming. The Mercy's Dawn had followed every protocol, broadcast its medical status repeatedly, and posed no threat to anyone. Admiral Vorkon finally took the stand in his own defense. He was a broken man, his empire destroyed and his beliefs shattered. I believed we were strong," he said quietly. "I believed that mercy was weakness, that showing compassion made us vulnerable. I thought the humans were soft, that attacking their medical ship would demonstrate Vorthon power." "And now?" asked Ambassador No Vorkon, looked around the courtroom, seeing representatives from dozens of species who had come to witness justice. "Now I understand that we were the weak ones. We attacked those who could not fight back because we were afraid of facing real strength." Commander Mordain was defiant to the end. When called to testify, he stood proudly and declared that he would do the same thing again. "The humans were interfering with Vorthon expansion," he snarled. "They deserve to die for their weakness." "Children deserve to die?" asked Ambassador No. "Wounded patients deserve to die? Doctors trying to heal the injured deserve to die." "Yes!" Mordain shouted. "Strength takes what it wants. The weak exist only to serve the strong." His words echoed in the silent courtroom. Even his fellow defendants looked away in shame. They were finally seeing their philosophy of might makes right for what it truly was: the justification of cowards who preyed on the defenseless. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every piece of evidence was examined, every witness heard, every legal procedure followed exactly. Humanity wanted the galaxy to see that justice meant following the law, not just imposing the will of the powerful. When the verdict came, it was unanimous. All defendants were found guilty of crimes against sentient life. Admiral Vorkon received life imprisonment. Commander Mordain, as the one who had given the direct order to fire, was sentenced to death. But even in this, humanity showed its true nature. Ambassador No stood before the court and made an unexpected request. "Your Honor, humanity requests that the death sentence be commuted to life imprisonment. We do not seek the death of our enemies, only justice for our friends." Judge Park considered the request. "Mr. Ambassador, the defendant showed no mercy to the victims of the Mercy's Dawn. Why should mercy be shown to him?" "Because we are not him," No replied simply. "We do not murder the defenseless even when they deserve no mercy. We are better than that." The sentence was commuted. Mordain would spend the rest of his life in prison, alive, but serving as a reminder that attacking innocent people was the greatest crime in the galaxy. As the trial ended, the real work of building a new galactic order began. The Vorthon Empire was dissolved, its conquered worlds freed to govern themselves. But humanity did not take territory or demand tribute. Instead, they established the Mercy's Dawn doctrine. Any attack on medical personnel, humanitarian workers, or clearly marked non-combatant vessels will be considered an act of war against all civilized species, Ambassador No announced to the Galactic Council. Such attacks will be met with immediate and overwhelming force. The doctrine was signed by every member of the galactic community. No one wanted to face the fury that had destroyed the Vorthon Empire. At the site where the Mercy's Dawn had been destroyed, humanity built a memorial station. Dr. An Yerin was chosen to lead the medical facility, which would provide free treatment to all species regardless of their ability to pay or their political affiliations. This station stands as a promise, Dr. An announced at the dedication ceremony. No matter who you are, where you come from, or what flag you serve under, if you need medical help, you will find it here. The memorial station was staffed by volunteers from dozens of species. Former enemies worked side by side, united in the mission to heal rather than harm. The children of Vorthon soldiers worked alongside human doctors, learning that strength came not from conquest, but from compassion. On the main wall of the station hung portraits of the Mercy's Dawn crew. Captain Park Jin-woo, who had tried to save lives until the very end. Dr. Lee So-min, who had died protecting her patients. Kim Tae-ho, Choi Ye-jin, Yoon Hai-won, and all the others who had given their lives for the principle that healing should know no boundaries. Below their portraits was a simple inscription. They died showing mercy to all. We live to honor their memory. The station became a symbol of the new galaxy that emerged from the war. Trade routes that had been controlled by Vorthon warships now carried medical supplies and humanitarian aid. Species that had been enemies for centuries began working together, inspired by humanity's example of fighting for justice rather than conquest. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity itself. Before the war, humans had been seen as peaceful but weak, idealistic but naive. Now they were recognized as the most dangerous species in known space. Dangerous not because they sought war, but because they were so devastatingly effective. When war became necessary, Admiral Jang Min-ho, now retired from active service, spoke at universities across the galaxy about the lessons of the Vorthon War. His message was always the same. Humanity learned long ago that the purpose of strength is to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We developed the most advanced weapons in the galaxy not because we wanted to conquer, but because we wanted to ensure that evil could never triumph over good. The former Vorthon worlds underwent a transformation that amazed the galaxy. Without their oppressive government, the Vorthon people proved capable of remarkable change. They established democracies, signed peace treaties with their neighbors, and even contributed ships and personnel to the memorial station's security force. Zex Corvain, the former Vorthon commander who had been captured at Kithara, became an advocate for galactic peace. He traveled throughout former Vorthon space, speaking about what he had learned during his imprisonment. I thought the humans would torture me, kill me, or at least treat me badly, he told audiences. Instead, they gave me medical care, good food, and respect. They showed me that real strength doesn't come from making others fear you. It comes from making others trust you. The war had lasted only 2 months, but its effects would be felt for generations. The galaxy had learned that attacking those who could not defend themselves was not just morally wrong, it was strategically suicidal. Humanity would not tolerate such behavior, and humanity had proven it possessed the power to back up its principles. 5 years after the war ended, Captain Lee So-ra of the UES New Dawn received a distress call from a remote system. Her ship, like all human medical vessels, was clearly marked with red crosses and carried the most advanced healing technology in the galaxy. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal from the Zerian colony," reported her communications officer. "They're reporting wounded from a mining accident." "Set course immediately," Lee ordered. "Maximum speed," as the New Dawn raced toward the emergency. Every other ship in the system moved aside to let them pass. The universal respect for medical vessels had become absolute. No one would ever again make the mistake.